friends, welcome to Dads and Daddies, a podcast about the lives and times of adult gay men in the here and now. I'm Brian Reuben Sowers, the dad.
And I am Judson Morrow, the daddy. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Judson.
I have incredible news for you.
Okay.
One of my outstanding sexual fantasies
Yes.
may be happening soon. I know. That's cool, right?
Yeah, what is it?
I advertised this on Sniffies. I am so interested in watching a guy and a girl fuck in front of me while I just watch. If you could see, if you could see Brian's face.
That is so not to my taste, but hey,
nor to my husband's, but I just, I
can't watch straight couples kiss on like a romantic comedy.
Disgusting.
Kind of.
How dare they put that out there? It just, it's so attractive to me. I do.
What are you naked in this situation?
I am naked in this situation, and I am just watching in this situation. I don't have the intention of hooking up with the woman, but I am interested in facilitating the man's erection. Like, for me, it's like I want to suck him hard and then watch him fuck.
And is that clear to the potential?
Oh, that's been made very clear. Yes.
Okay. And this came from a Sniffies ad? I'm not ad, but like an ask that you publicized?
Yeah. I mean, I say in my profile, I'm like, hey, bye guys. One of my outstanding fantasies is to watch you fuck a woman. If you and she would be down for that, like hit me up. And this guy hit me up. He's like, I'd love to watch you, or I'd love to have you watch me fuck my wife.
Wow.
Yeah. Really exciting. We're working on the logistics.
Okay.
I don't think it can be. I don't think it can be at my house.
No.
I can't imagine telling my husband that is what I hosted.
That's amazing. You also do something that I don't do, which is like schedule in advance.
I mean, not too far in advance, but I do
You'll
like
dates for later in the week.
Yeah. But I mean, the week of I'll schedule. But the reality is like I'm busy. I like busy men, and if I know the opening, I will try to book it.
Yeah, I just worry that if it doesn't happen right here, right now, and we make a plan, that plan
flake.
is going to fall apart.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, Bruce and I had an incredible hookup recently planned for like a Saturday afternoon that I think got booked on a Tuesday.
Right.
I checked in with him on Friday and was just like, hey, bro, like we're still hot and ready for you.
Right.
Come on over Saturday morning. Here is everything. And he connected. He also came over again. So
right.
Sometimes I understand your logic that like if it doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen.
Well, because typically people are online because they are wanting it in that moment.
Correct.
And it is hard to predict how one will feel in that way. And if you are needing it in that moment, the likelihood is you will get it in another way and then might not want to follow up on that plan you made for later.
That is probably the logic that most of the men who are navigating these platforms use. So I totally get it. I often joke that I wish I could embed like a Calendly link.
That's amazing. Can you not?
I'm going to try and see if it works.
That's so funny.
For those of you that don't, again, have corporate jobs.
We can put it on our website, and you can just tell people to go to our website and look for your hookup Calendly.
Go to the website and book a session. Calendly is just, it's an online booking tool. So if you are like a salesperson, for example, and you're sending an email out to prospects like, hey, do you have 30 minutes to talk? They can just book the appointment with you like via the link in the email.
I don't know why I typically take offense to receiving a Calendly link. Like,
why?
It's just like,
how dare you think I'm in a book?
Like, you want to talk to me, so here's my link. I don't know. There's something like I don't like about it, but I want to go back to the fantasy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So when is this happening?
Probably in the next couple weeks. Obviously, from being in a partnership, it takes a lot of scheduling, even with 2 people.
Right.
So I think with 3, And I also want to be respectful of this other person who's not even part of the conversation.
Well, that was my next question is, has she been part of this at all? Or are you only interacting with the guy?
You know, I hope that she has been part of
Right.
the conversation, but in terms of the interacting, it's just been me and him.
Right.
But he has been steadily reporting to me that she is interested.
Right.
So that's cool.
Toby and I have somebody that we hook up with. I don't want to say on the regular, but we've hooked up with this person on more than one occasion. And even though we both now have a relationship with this person, like all the setup happens between Toby and this person. It's very funny. And like,
Oh, for the three of you.
yes, for the
Got
three
it.
of us. Yeah, it's very funny.
Is that true for you for other people? Or is Toby, if it's going to be all three of you, is Toby in charge?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, but for this guy
For
specifically.
this guy, for whatever reason, it's always like this guy goes to Toby, and he and I have met individually or separately from Toby, and Toby has as well. But when it's the three of us, for whatever reason, it's always Toby arranging, and so I'm the wife who is just hoping I'm getting all the details, which is so funny for me because I'm the planner typically of our.
That's why I was
social lives.
surprised.
Yeah. And recently, this is so dumb. Recently, we went to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden with a bunch of families that we are friends with through our kids' school. And for whatever reason, I had been left off the text. It was another mom organizing, and Toby was the representative of this family on that text. And it was driving me insane to not have all the latest details and to constantly be asking him for like, so where are we meeting and what time? And do we know exactly where in the park? And he was loving it.
Why didn't you just get added to the text?
That's a good question. I don't know. Because I also didn't want to take that from him. Like, I think, like, I didn't want to imply that I didn't trust his planning of it, but it was just funny. It was driving me crazy. And it does too when he and this person are planning our threesomes. Not as much, but like, I'm like, so what's happening? Where are we going?
I also love that this conversation, I just feel like the content of this conversation is par excellence, this podcast, because it started with my desire to watch a couple fuck and segued into a family trip to the Botanical Garden.
Are you saying I make everything about me?
No, I think these are the topics that we talk about.
Right.
Like you're a dad and you have a family, and families do things like go to the Botanic Gardens.
And you do not, and you do things like watch couples fuck.
Yeah. I mean, I actually really enjoy the Botanic Gardens as well. Their lightscape during the holidays is amazing. Yeah, where they just decorate all the trees and plants and greenhouses with lights.
Yes.
Of course.
Will you report back if this hookup happens?
Oh, we're having a whole episode about it. I'm going to have them on.
Can I just set up the equipment there?
Yes.
Can we just like live record the whole thing?
I can't tell you. I am just so excited because this has been outstanding for me for such a long time.
Yeah.
Especially because, like, listeners, I hope all your sexual fantasies come true.
Right.
And at this point, at 41 years old, having been sexually active for 20 years, exclusively with men who have sex with men, I have just had a lot of permutations of kinds of sex, role plays of sex, types of men in the sex, all different numbers, all different spaces, times, whatever. And this is just so appealing to me.
I don't even know. Should we do a fantasy episode? I think we probably should, and just like explore like what fantasies we've each achieved maybe over time.
We're doing a fantasy episode, and it's when I live record my watching this couple fuck.
Because
period.
If I sit and think about it, I don't know that I have fantasies. I mean, the one that was unachieved for me and has now been achieved was just threesomes with my husband. But for the longest time, it was like he was not interested in the two of us being part of the same threesome. And now we've done that several times and have found that to be a lot of fun. But for me, group activity is my fantasy. And I'm very fortunate in that between my husband coming around to it and then you and I being part of a friend circle who we have friends who throw an incredible monthly sex party. Or to my mind, it's an
incredible party, and it's a literal 3 blocks from our pod studio.
I mean, if that is not, I know sounds funny to say, but if that is not divine intervention, that like, seriously, it's so lovely. It's, Anyway, we're going to get into it because this week's episode is about sex parties. We're talking sex party etiquette.
Sex party etiquette. But before we go, I will say this, that you have not very many outstanding sexual fantasies, I don't think is a lack of curiosity or creativity. I think it's a great indicator that your sexual desires are sated. That's incredible.
Maybe but part of me does wonder if part of that is a lack of creativity or confidence in pursuing certain fantasies or fear of certain experiences, and that if I was maybe a bit more open-minded, a bit less risk averse, if I could maybe open up my scope of what my fantasies could be.
Well, I have great news. You live with your brain 24 hours a day, and it doesn't require anything for you to let yourself wander into the idea of a fantasy. So just give yourself some room.
Yeah.
I fantasize when I'm like standing in line waiting to buy my groceries.
I mean, my fantasies
mainly
are
about
just
the guy in
like,
front of me.
About just hookups with people that I want to hook up with, people that I've met that I think are hot, and trying to make that happen. But in terms of like yours is a specific kind of act that not many people get to experience if they don't seek it out, ask for it.
You're going to have to ask. And
right.
Listen, this has been on my mind for such a long time. I'm going to call them straight presenting because it is a cis presenting man and a cis presenting woman like out in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, is this who I ask?
Right.
Like, should I just ask them if I can watch it? And I just don't feel like
right.
that's the right move.
Right.
So having advertised it online and getting a bite, if you will, feels really cool. Like the interest is out there. I've just not known how to approach it previously.
Right.
I'll keep you updated.
Okay.
And in the meantime, let's talk about sex party etiquette.
Yes, let's do that. Okay, we'll be right back. So I'm going to take your lead on much of this because, I have certainly my own set of sex party experience, but I know that you frequent more of the kind of regular parties in the city that happen on a weekly basis, that are kind of charge an admission.
Sure.
And so do you want to start, I don't know, describing like what is out there first? Is that the way to start? Yeah.
So I think the reason that sex parties have proliferated in New York City, there's a couple reasons. So as historically gay bars have become more inclusive to be queer bars, there's less sex.
Yes.
Period. There's just not a lot of back rooming.
Right.
Some queer bars are more frisky than others.
Yeah.
But you used to be able to have sex on the dance floor at Splash, right? Period.
I mean, sex?
I had sex on the dance floor at Splash.
Okay.
Was that not what everyone else was doing? R.I.P. Splash. The other thing is we don't have, and this is because of laws that were passed in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic.
Yes.
We don't have a sauna scene here in New York. Other cities do.
Okay.
Fort Lauderdale comes to mind. Chicago comes to mind. There's a really good one in L.A., Seattle. But just because of the restrictions around the health of these places, we just don't have that. There's a couple legacy ones. I've never been, but I hear
there's like the West Side Club and the East Side Club.
Yeah,
right?
And I just don't hear great things about them. I've never been. I never thought to go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of sex parties. They're organized either by party promoters. There's also group hangs on sniffies, and I'm sure there are tons and tons that I don't even know about.
So to my mind, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think there's kind of three categories of sex party in New York City that I'm aware of.
Okay, what are they?
One is what you're talking about, these organized by party promoters. You know, they each have a name, they have a regular schedule, there's an email list, it sends you out invites and updates and information, they charge a fee, etc. Then there are these group hangs that people try to put together on sniffies. And then the third is just, folks who host them at their private home and invite their friends or fuck buddies or whatever it is.
I would add a fourth.
Okay.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think there's also, less on a regular schedule, but there are also some promoted events that are just sex parties that may happen like once a quarter or twice a year, which is different from like an ongoing weekly party.
Yeah. There's many a Fire Island party that is an annual party that I was going to say devolves, but maybe I should take away the D and just evolves into a sex party by by the end of the night. That maybe, it starts as one thing. And then there's even parties I've been to in Fire Island where they specifically say like at this time, like if things are going to heat up. Like if you don't want to be part of that, leave by midnight. And there's no, from
or
midnight.
If you do want to be part of that and need the energy, like rest until 11:30 and come at midnight.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
So the reason I like sex parties specifically is because while I do have pretty decent luck online, I'm on a little app break.
Right.
It does, and I hope this is relatable, it does gobble up a lot of your time.
Yes.
The constant looking, the planning, the execution, the travel, the compare and despair, right? The wondering why a conversation just stopped mid-flow.
So much time.
Why someone who was so your speed wouldn't respond to you.
And it's also super distracting. Like if I try to have the apps open while I'm working and it's just kind of there in the background, like I can't help but like constantly, it's just that it's so inefficient.
And I think we've also been programmed that if there's not an immediate response, that fish comes off the line. Right? Like if your phone is just sitting next to your computer while you're working, someone very hot and very available messages you and you don't get to the message until even 7 minutes later, they've already moved on. Right? So I'm not speaking poorly of the apps. I've had good luck on the apps. I am taking a break currently, but what I really like about sex parties specifically is they're extremely efficient.
Yeah.
And when I do a cost-benefit analysis, because I know cost has to come into play for all of us. We want to spend our things, we want to spend our money on things that are meaningful to us, worthwhile to us, that we see value in.
Yeah.
If I compare the time lost to apps versus the cash spent on a party, the party kind of wins for me. Because I know when it's happening, I know I can put it in my schedule, I can go when I want, I can leave when I want, I can, get it done in 30 minutes or linger for 2 hours.
Right.
I feel like I have a lot more options.
Yeah, a lot more control.
And what's nice too is I think that I'm not going to pretend that sex parties are like a democratic space, but the pool is limited and people are there for a reason.
Right.
So I think people just commit to what is available.
So that's where my kind of preferences come in, is like the curation of the crowd, and why I much prefer something hosted by a friend who I know has put some thought into the invite list and all of this. You and I have friends who host essentially a monthly party, and I think it's just the loveliest experience because I trust their taste, not necessarily in like physical looks, although that quality is quite high at this event, but just like the energy and it feels very friendly and welcoming and non-judgmental. And because everybody knows they were invited by a friend, there's this just like amiability and amicability. And like there's a portion of this party which is just a bunch of guys hanging out naked in the kitchen, like between hanging out in the various bedrooms where activity is happening, just like with a drink or a soda, just chatting. And it's like, how do you know these people? How do you know these people? And yes, you're
Where do you live?
Yeah. And it's it's just a really lovely energy. And then even in the rooms where, activity is taking place, I've heard people like introduce themselves and like, have like a nice kind of meet cute as they're like naked and stroking each other. Or I've heard people like realize that what they have just done in front of all these other people was like really performative. And so then they'll like, in jest, like, ask for applause or bow or say
You're welcome.
Yeah, or say something silly, and it's like, I don't know, it's a really fun energy. And so that's where like I'm most comfortable. And my experience and I haven't attended many of the weekly ones or paid ones, but it's just that like I have no sense of what other people's agendas are, or attitudes are, or like what they want out of like the interaction
at something that's less curated.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing that I think specifically about daytime after work parties or daytime midday parties is the agenda is pretty clear, right? Like people, if you are at a sex party on a Tuesday afternoon at 12 p.m., it is because you are on your break and you're trying to like knock it out and get back to whatever the fuck you need to do to generate money or finish your to-do list or prepare for incoming guests, whatever.
Right.
So the efficiency for me is incredible.
Right.
It does lack the social aspect that you're talking about, which the party in particular that you're addressing is really cool.
Yeah.
I also feel comfortable. I've never been to a sex party with a similar social vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was at a sex party recently where I ran into someone just who I know as friends of friends through the gay ether.
Okay.
And he and I had hooked up independently and again in P-Town.
Yeah.
And after we finished, I was like, oh, when was the last time I saw you? So we took a minute to kind of think when we had last run into each other. And he was like, oh yeah, at Cholula Lemon's drag show in Bed-Stuy. And this guy who is in the middle of fucking someone else goes, can you guys not talk about drag right now? So there it isn't always as... I think he meant it in jest, but they say in Spanish, like, entre broma y broma, la verdad se asoma. Like, there's always truth in every joke.
Yes.
So he was a little agitated, but at least got his point across.
Wait, and this was at the curated one we're talking about, or no?
No. This is at a separate one.
Okay.
This was at a space in Chelsea. I mean, I thought it was funny.
That is very funny. It's a great. I love that.
My feelings weren't hurt, but I was like, okay, like I'll back off. So it's the efficiency that's key for me. I'm also pretty selective because daytime and after work parties, I feel have the lower likelihood of people on drugs. I'm really reluctant to go to a sex party that's like a Friday or Saturday night, starts at 11.
Right.
It just is easier for me and more comfortable for me as a sober person to walk into a space during, well, at least now that the days are longer, daylight hours.
Yes.
And feel like I'm not going to be attractive to someone while they grind their teeth.
Yes.
So
no, that's a really great point. He doesn't, from what I know, throw parties anymore, but there was a guy that I had been turned on to. I can't remember how, just like the orgy guy was his like handle.
I love that. Clear.
And he threw these, I think they were Fridays at noon, these parties, and they were very, very close to my previous office in the Port Authority area, let's say. And yeah, I mean, it was exactly what you're describing. And and then there's Workman's Lunch, which is another exactly what it sounds like. Get
in, get out.
Yeah. And gosh, the first time I tried to go to one of the orgy guys' parties, I just remember I stood on the opposite side of the street from the door and just like walked the door for like half an hour. I was so nervous. And I'm not even sure I got up the courage to go inside my first time. I've certainly partaken and enjoyed enough, but also I'm just in a different place now and like have much more just comfort with myself as a sexual being.
And it comes across in a party. Like you can kind of tell it doesn't matter the shape or the size. For me, it's like tapping into the confidence or the directness. Like if someone is there and is tapped into their desire and can ask for it. Yeah. Which is a really good segue for like how to ask.
Yes, I was going to say, we said this conversation was going to be about etiquette. So let's talk sex party etiquette.
If it's a private event at someone's home and they request a specific arrival time, be polite and go at that time.
Okay.
Right? I think that's rule number one. If
Okay.
it's a private party and they request arrival,
Right.
go when they say.
Okay.
And even if you get there a little early, you can ease into it
Right.
and kind of see who comes in.
Yes.
If it's open, go whenever. I prefer to go early
Yeah.
to everything so I can ease in, get comfortable, kind of see how it flows.
Right.
And then kind of like make my choices.
Yes.
There's also, other ones that just end early. Like if you like workman's lunch
Yes.
is very, very full from like 12 to 1.
Right.
And after that, it's like,
Right.
people have left
Right,
because they
right.
have to go back to whatever.
And even at someone's private home, even if the invite is kind of a wide range of time, I agree with you that arriving on the earlier side is better because I think people arrive excited and wanting to, get right into the action, and people peak. People peak early and and they might still be hanging out, but like the later I think you arrive, the less options there are of folks who are like still really into the activity.
I think if it's at someone's home, I would bring a gift, even if it's a sex party, something small, like paper towels or ice or seltzer or just something to say, thank you for having me
Wow,
in
I
your
have not
home.
done that.
Oh yeah. My go-to is ice.
Okay.
Even if they don't use it, they can just throw it in their sink
Yeah.
and it costs me like $3
Yeah.
on the way there.
Yeah.
The other part is I always go prepared with my own lube.
Yeah.
I have like a 1 or 2 ounce that I can just tuck in my sock.
Right.
Even if lube is provided, like you never know what vessel it's coming out of. And to me, there's nothing worse trying to open one of those square lube packets
Right. Oh
when
my
you're
gosh,
already
no.
kind of slicked up.
Right. Yes.
Impossible.
Yes.
Impossible.
You mean like the ketchup and mustard packets that you get?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heinz lube.
Yes, Heinz lube is the worst. Heinz should stop making lube.
Terrible. The worst when you get them mixed up.
Yeah.
So, come on time, come prepared.
Come prepared.
Don't
with a gift and your own lube.
and
You don't partake of poppers, correct?
I used to, but
Yeah.
I don't anymore.
Right.
It's a very, very gray area for sober people because it is a mood and mind altering substance,
Of course.
but the duration is short.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well,
But probably best not to.
for me specifically,
Yeah.
who's had a problem historically with inhalants, like I steer clear.
Right.
And what I am keyed into is if I feel like I need poppers to better enjoy the experience,
Yeah.
it means I'm actually not super into this person.
Right.
And I should probably politely stop.
Right. This is a tangent, but do you mind if the person you are with uses poppers?
I really don't, especially because I understand how they work. I understand what they do.
Right.
There is, to me, there are diminishing returns, right? Like if they're just like locked on the bottle the whole time, that's not enjoyable for me.
Sure.
But if they need a hit or two to like dilate,
Right.
totally down.
Right.
So it's just kind of something that I have to gauge.
Right.
And then again, if I'm uncomfortable, I can say no or no thank you. And I think that's where we are now. Like, how do you say no or no thank you in a sex party
Right.
environment? It can happen at any time, right? Like you can say no to a prospect, like who's into you, but
Yeah.
you're not into them.
Yeah.
And I think the nicest thing is directness.
Yeah.
And the thing is, consent gets really tricky in a sex party
It does.
situation.
Yes.
However,
it kind of feels like walking into one of those places that's being filmed, and you see those signs on the wall that say, "By walking in here, you have consented to being filmed." Like
Right.
by walking into a sex party, you there's the assumption that you have consented to kind of anything happening.
something
Happening. Yes.
So I think the way I see people say no most frequently is imagine that you're standing on the wall and someone who's hot kind of passes you. The wall stander will like put a hand out, touch their shoulder, touch their nipple, maybe touch their dick.
Yeah.
And the walker will gently push them away.
Right. Or
That-
keep walking. Yeah.
Or keep walking.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a very polite no. I
Right.
don't think you have to say anything in
Right.
that situation.
Right.
If that happens to you, I feel like in a sex party environment, you really do get the one shot. Like if someone says no to you in that way or more directly, I think you just need to accept it as the no that it is
Yes.
and not continue to pursue them.
Right.
And also, guard your heart a little bit. You're at a sex party.
Yes.
Someone said no. Guess what? You're at a sex party. There's other opportunities.
Yes.
It's a little trickier when you are in the middle of the action and just not feeling it.
Right.
I have found that the best way to kind of disengage is to just say thank you and do like a little bit of a backup.
Okay. Now, at a sex party, there's this other type of no that you may have to give where you may be interacting with somebody who you are very into, and then someone else tries to interject and become part of that.
Yes.
And you're not into that. How do you handle that?
I actually had a guy do this with me, and I'm like, this is a masterclass. So I was at workman's lunch, and I had already gotten off, so I was on the way to just kind of like clean up and get out of here.
Yeah.
This very attractive dude approaches me, and we start kissing a little bit. And I was like, "Hey, man, I just got off, and I'm kind of headed out." And he's like, "Can you stay for like 5? I just want to kiss and stuff." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." So we're in the middle of like kissing, rubbing, kind of touching a little bit, and a third party kind of enters and puts his face in between the two of ours. And this dude simply says to him, "Hey, I'm just having a moment with this guy. Excuse us." And I thought it was the tone was right.
Yeah.
The content was right.
Yeah.
It was like very direct and very polite. And I remember at that moment, number one, it made me more attracted to him because I appreciated his communication style.
Right.
And number two, I thought, okay, remember this in the future.
Yeah.
Because you're right. If in a sex party situation, that's the other sort of tacit consent is that you can join anything anytime.
Yeah.
So that's how I have learned rather recently to ask wanting to participate bystander to give us space.
Yeah. Something you said I want to get back to, which is kind of like the stealing your heart. Because like, I think just by nature of the beast, there's a lot of rejection that can happen at a sex party.
Of course.
But like, you have to realize that like this is not at all a judgment of
your character
or you as a person, and it may even just be that person, like we've talked about on the apps, like that person just might not want what you have to offer in that moment. It doesn't necessarily mean that they find you unattractive but I think we immediately think like, oh, I'm hideous, or like, I'm like,
I'm garbage.
Why am I here? Yeah.
And I mean, it gets a little tricky too, because, the way that we've identified the ideal male body is very specific anymore.
Yes.
And you do see that body type engaging kind of constantly.
Yeah.
So it's easy to register like, oh, if I looked like that, I would get more of this. We don't know anything about how much they're enjoying the particular situation. Like they may be engaging a lot, but are they happy about it? Do they feel obligated? What if they are beautiful but also don't know how to say no?
Right.
So they're uncomfortable and they're just engaging because they haven't learned how to advocate for themselves.
Yes.
I am in sales and it's very helpful as I navigate sex parties.
Yeah.
Because to me, you just have to get through no to get to yes. And I always
explain that.
I mean, it's a numbers game, right? Like, of course, there's this feeling that, I had this feeling recently. I went to a sex party and I probably hooked up with 7 different guys, all of whom I liked for different reasons. And I walked out of there like, but that wasn't every guy. Like, what's enough? Right.
Okay.
So by getting through the no's to get to the yes, I just think it's a numbers game.
Right.
And I also treat it as a zero-sum game. Let me set up the scenario for you.
Okay.
You walk into a sex party and there is a stud that captures your attention over there on the wall. 5 minutes ago, before you walked into the sex party, you did not know this person.
Right.
And even if you approach and they say no, you still do not know this person.
Right.
So nothing really happened.
Right.
Maybe a little bit of a hit to the ego, but
Sure.
ultimately you're exactly where you were before you walked into this party.
Right. You're absolutely correct. Yes.
So treating it as no's to yes and a zero sum is really helpful because I don't have the idealized male body, but I do feel confident in those spaces.
Yeah.
I am direct. I am pretty outgoing. So I have those things on my side.
Yeah.
And I also know my sexual strengths.
Okay.
So I go looking for a particular thing. I tend to top at sex parties largely because I tend to be building them into my day and I'm not coming from home.
Right.
So I'm just not prepared to bottom.
Right.
Very rarely am I like at home cleaning out, then going to a sex party.
Right.
And even then, and we've talked about this before, because I don't bottom regularly, I'm always out of practice and always self-conscious.
Okay.
So I'm more apt to bottom in a one-on-one situation than in a party situation because it's like, what if it's dirty? What if it gets messy? Where's the cleanup situation?
I mean,
Topping
we're
at a
gonna
sex
spend
party
a
is
whole
safe.
hour sometime talking about how self-conscious one is
To bottom.
as a bottom. Okay, so there's two things that you brought up that I want to get to. One being the numbers game and kind of like the count that we keep in our heads at a sex party. But before we get to that, but remind me to get back to that, is, this idea of, not knowing what people want and like feeling rejected, but maybe not even knowing. Like, my big question at a sex party is, how do I determine who is a top and who is a bottom? I find that to be, I get so in my head about it. And then what I end up doing is just like watching what they're doing with other people. But then by that point, they've done it already and might not want to do it again. And I'm a funny, maybe not funny, maybe this is very common, but like, I'm a bottom who tends to find the kind of stereotypical bottom attractive. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, that being said, you never.
So you bottom out.
What's that?
You bottom out.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that what do
you
you
just
mean?
rub your butts together.
No, shut up. No. But I mean, the truth is there is no, like, yes, stereotypical bottom does not mean somebody's a bottom. Like, there's I mean, am I going to get canceled for saying this? Like Troye Sivan claims he's not necessarily a bottom just because he's saying Bloom. Point being, like, I get so in my head about like, okay, I find this guy really attractive, and I try to make something happen, but then I realize, nope, he's a bottom. Like, how do you? Now you're more averse than I am, but like, how do you navigate like what somebody wants to do, and how do you transition from like standing at a party to like, let's
being on your back?
Yeah.
I do. Again, this just goes directness in the ask. I love that you take the cues. Like if you see someone topping,
Yeah.
maybe they would want to top me.
Yeah.
I actually feel that's where my strength lies at a sex party because I feel like people see the way that I top
Yeah.
and are like, oh, that looks interesting to me.
Right.
Like I'll bottom for that dude. And
Right.
it's hard to get your sexual style across online.
Right.
So I do feel like that's a benefit. If you see that they're topping, but again, they might get tuckered out and be over it.
Exactly.
I just think I'm really the biggest fan of directness. And
Yeah.
it's simply like, hey, do you want to fuck?
Right.
I'm a bottom.
Right.
That's it. And it could be, I topped out recently. I was at this party and this very sexy guy and I started making out, but he had underwear on. And I was like, something tells me he's a top because his butt is not exposed. So I just asked him, I said, are you wearing underwear because you're not going to bottom today? He said, exactly. I was like, well, I hope you find what you're looking for. You're hot. Let's get some more and I'll let you go. But that's just, I just have a lot of practice too.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel embarrassed or shy. And it isn't because I have the ideal body type or the biggest dick. Like I'm pretty average all over. Right?
Sure, I'll give you. I think you're, beautiful and all those things.
Thank
but
you.
yes.
But it's also easy at a party to compare, like, oh, that's a juicier butt. Oh, that's a bigger cock.
Sure,
da, da, da.
sure.
Directness is directness is key.
I think this is all great advice. I think that we probably have many listeners who are feeling like I do listening to you, which is like easy for you to say. And like getting up the courage to be as direct as you're describing might feel like a barrier, but it is a goal. I want to aspire to that bravery and that directness.
I mean, you may fall, you may fly.
Yeah.
That's from Girls Five Above.
And back to the numbers game part of it, like you went to our friend's party recently. I couldn't be there. And afterwards, when we were talking about it, like the first thing you told me was like your count, like how many
correct
people you had done each side of the coin,
sure.
as it were. And that's very much who I am too, where I'm constantly keeping score at these parties, like how many people, and there's times where I leave these parties feeling great about myself, and times where I leave these parties feeling not as great about myself. But it's just, I don't know. Do I have a question there, or do I have a point of conversation?
Well, let me ask you this: like when on a friend level,
yeah.
When we're chatting about a sex party and I say something as banal as like, yeah, I fucked 9 guys, are you like, what a cool person? What a great guy. It's funny that we do that because, my husband and I even have like a little bit of a competitive edge to it. The number doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It doesn't make you respect me more. It doesn't make you admire me more. It may make you like envious of having not been able to go.
Right.
But like my conquests in our friendship and listeners with your friends don't matter, especially because I've been in sex party situations where I had a lot of sex and it was good, but didn't feel a particular like emotional or just like the spark connection.
Right.
And then I've had sex parties where I connected with one person, albeit even briefly, but it just felt so intense.
Yes.
And that was a win.
Yes. I've had those experiences myself. Yes.
And lastly, whenever I am feeling like I want to be at a sex party, I'm in the mood to be at a sex party, but I'm not feeling like full confidence, I tell myself, you know what? If you don't end up hooking up, at the very least, you get to see some very hot scenes.
Well, that's the thing too, and we haven't even talked about that. Like, it is some of the best live theater in New York City. Going to a sex party, and this comes from somebody. By the way, we haven't talked about pornography, but like, I personally don't partake of porn. Like, there's no judgment there, but like, it just doesn't.
I don't use it very much, largely because it doesn't do a lot for me.
It doesn't
anymore.
do a lot for me either. For me to be turned on, there needs to be some sense that something could happen, and that's why for me, being on the apps is my porn. But watching pornography for me has always just been something on the background at certain bars. But being at a sex party and watching it live between
so hot,
it's very hot. It's
so hot.
Yeah.
And I'll see certain things, certain scenes, and think, why would I want to expend the energy of getting involved in that when I can just like watch how hot it is? Like, there are moments that just feel like work.
Right.
Like, am I gonna, or you just admit to yourself that they're clearly into each other, and that's also okay.
Yes.
So if you've never ever been to a sex party and you're really curious about it, I would say maintain the attitude that you're going to see some great scenes, and that if you do end up making a connection with someone, it's just a bonus.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to take a break. I want to come back for our Go Ask Your Dad segment. But I do want to come back to this at some point, because I feel like we talked about 2 or kind of maybe 3 of the categories. What we didn't really talk about are the sniffies group hangs.
Oh, right.
Which I have maybe only one anecdote about, but like, in my experience, those have been the least appealing. Have you had
I've never been.
Oh, you've never
I've been to the closest I've come is like an anonymous pump and dump, and I'm leaving as someone else is coming.
Right.
But I've never been to a sniffies party.
The what you're describing is also what I went to, and it was not appealing. But we can get to that story another time. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and we have a Go Ask Your Dad question. Go Ask Your Dad is what we call our advice segment. We ask listeners to send us questions or voice memos. You can send them to us at dadsanddaddies@gmail.com. You can DM us on Instagram at dadsanddaddiespod. And this question today comes from Greg in Houston. And here we go. I am in a non-monogamous, non-romantic roommate relationship, by which I mean we live together and have separate bedrooms. We are not romantic partners. We are open to date or be with others, but we do mess around in threesome situations, and I don't want to date, enter into a romantic relationship, or invest in anyone else. And I often get jealous if he dates or shows more than just a sexual interest in someone else. He recently invited one of his very handsome fuck buddies over to the house while I was finishing up at work. He thought it would be a fun surprise for me to come home, find them, and join in, since the three of us have all played together before. But when I walked in on them in full swing, I was shocked, angry, and stormed out. Since then, we have not had any threesomes, nor has he brought up the topic of having one at all, which also upsets me because it's the only type of sexual experience I get to share with him. What should I do?
Greg. I want to empathize with you here. I am never more upset than when I am surprised by sex. I hate that. I'm just not the kind of person that's like ready to go at the drop of a hat.
Has this happened to you? Have you been surprised by sex?
I think earlier in my relationship with my husband, like he would schedule something close to the time I was intended to arrive home so I could like maybe join in if I wanted to. And now there's a very clear line of like, you do you, I'll do me, or we can plan something together. But I know that I'm not going to be done with work and like wanting to fuck a stranger.
Right.
So I am sorry that happened. I'm sure it was like shocking and hurtful, maybe who knows how you were feeling that day when you walked into that situation.
Right.
So I just want to empathize with someone who does not like to be surprised by sex.
No, I think you make a really good point that like to come in, especially after a day at work and like you're just not in that headspace.
Right.
And then you walk in and find yourself like under pressure of immediately getting into that headspace and physically ready to do this, like that does feel really maybe kind of inconsiderate when for the other person it was like this, you know, what do they call, what is the letter section of Penthouse or Playboy used to be called? Like this fantasy, you know?
Yeah.
So yes, and I think, like you said, having that conversation and having like delineated that clear line, like surprise sex is no good. Is probably step one. Like you should have this conversation with your non-romantic roommate who you have threesomes with. Like surprises are not in the cards.
Yeah, and there's two pieces here. There's number one, what sounds like some other feelings about this person.
Yes.
And how they were stressed when you walked into the situation.
Yeah.
And what you can do moving forward.
Yes.
Because I don't have the background on what other feelings might be present,
right.
I'm just going to leave that piece alone.
Okay.
I would like to talk about what you can do moving forward.
Okay.
And it's just like you said, if you don't like to be surprised by sex, you need to have very clear boundaries around it. And if you are in a situation where the dust has settled and you would still like to engage in a threesome with this person, I think you should make that clear and also be very direct around the boundaries around it. And if you want to take the extra daddy step and have more kind of power or control of the situation, not in a manipulative way, but in a confident way, make the plan yourself. Like find the third, ask your roommate if he is into them, and then make the plan to meet up together when you feel like it's convenient, like your heart is there, like your dick is there. That is what I can say about moving forward, only because that's how I have navigated surprise sex with my husband. I'm happy to have threesomes with you. I'm happy for you to enjoy sex independently with other people. I just don't want to walk into it.
Yeah.
Which is different. Like if we're if we're on Fire Island and I'm just like out and about, like going to yoga, going to get a drink with my friend on the beach or whatever, and I come home and he's with someone, that's different.
Right.
Like it's vacation time.
Right.
But in
that's a very specific kind of vacation.
In the real world, like, please don't expect me to engage on a weekday when I'm just like thinking I'm going to come home and start dinner.
Right. Also, like, I think particularly after a day at work, one can never predict anybody else's mind frame after a day at work. And I think we all, during the workday, look forward to the end of our day, whatever it is going to be. Whether it is, I'm going to come home and cook dinner, I'm going to come home and flop in front of the TV, I'm going to come home and like wrestle with my kids, whatever it is. Like we already kind of have our like decompressing plan in our head. And so like while sex and threesomes might be fun, it might be only fun if we were part of the planning of that and have been looking forward to it, and it is not a disruption in our plans.
That's a great point. And that's another plus for sex parties. They're so deliberate.
Yes.
Right? Like if I'm in the mood and have the energy and the time, then I get to make the active choice about whether or not I want to attend.
Yeah.
But in Greg's situation, he was really without agency.
Yes.
And I think that's what was probably pretty hurtful or upsetting.
Yeah.
But there seemed to be some clear steps about moving forward.
Yeah.
At least in the realm of how to navigate sexual activity with other people with this roommate.
I have to say, what impresses me, Judson, about you is that I would say a lot of your recommendations across different questions or just the situations we've been talking about comes down to like being direct, open, and honest, which is not the Midwestern sensibility for the most part.
No, this is learned behavior. On the one hand, I'm going to end up being a one-trick pony. Like you're going to ask the question, I'll be like direct, open, and honest. Duh.
No, but that's amazing, and I think it's what more people need to hear and do.
Well, it is not the Midwestern way, and there are certain situations in my life where I'm still behaving in a Midwestern way because it's with the people from the Midwest with whom I was cultured.
Right.
So I'm reverting back to some old behaviors, and I do not like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you. I really appreciate that.
But it's just,
Nothing if not direct.
Yes. No, I listen, I always say, I mean, being, a coastal Jew who has no issue being direct, I always say that clarity, the setting of expectations, like all of these things are one of the keys to happiness, because I think the meeting of expectations is what makes people feel happy and satisfied and safe and calm and all those things. And it is this like ambiguity, that often arises from this like desire to like not rock the boat and like keep everything nice, that ends up causing a lot of confusion and then like these hurt feelings because like plans weren't kept or expectations weren't met, but we all just like keep them buried because it was all under the guise of just making things easy and nice. My husband right now thinks I'm talking directly to him, by the way.
I heard your podcast, Brian.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. I am, but I'm not. Greg, I hope that answered your question. I hope that is helpful to you. Thank you for sending us your question. And again, listeners, please do send us your questions. We are not licensed therapists. We are not mental health professionals, but we are two adult gay men who have been living out of the closet way longer than we were in the closet. We've lived through decades of this stuff and are now at points in our life where we feel we've achieved some wisdom. So that's where we're coming from with Go Ask Your Dad.
And love.
And love.
Out of love, honestly.
We have a lot of love for all you listening, and definitely for each other, and more as we do this. I get to know you better and grow to love you more every week. Thanks for joining us. Please tell your friends. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe and follow us on Instagram. That's at Dads and Daddies Pod. Email us your Go Ask Your Dad questions at dadsandaddies@gmail.com. And we'll see you in a week.
See you soon.